Here's some of the posters that we did for our Warfare, Terrorism, Genocide class. These are all student posters here about some of the key figures and key emotions throughout the Battle of Stalingrad. So first one we have here is Friedrich Paulus. He was the German commander during the Battle of Stalingrad. He was there from pretty much beginning to end under orders of Hitler. He was there till January 30th, 1943, until he surrendered to the Russian forces and became a prisoner of war for many years. So he kind of suffered a pretty bad fate after the war. And on the contrasting side here, we have Vasily Trekhov. So Trekhov, he was the commander of the Russian side. And he was brought into the battle as the Russian forces were getting really worn down in the winter months. He was responsible for the formation of the counteroffensive, which encircled the city of Stalingrad, cut off any sort of supplies to the German forces inside the city, and eventually led to the Russian victory in the Battle of Stalingrad. So he was the key figure as the leader of the forces in Stalingrad. Moving back here, we have Soldier Gunther. So Soldier Gunther, he was just a regular foot soldier in the Battle of Stalingrad. He was an MG-34 gunner, which was one of the machine guns they used back then. But he basically in his book talked a lot about the atrocities he saw in battle, how terrible the war was, and gives a lot of insight into what the normal foot soldier would be going through during that battle. So our next poster here is going to be on the Barricadi gun factory. So this is a factory in the sort of industrial district in Stalingrad. So this was a factory that was constantly fought over for each side. A lot of the fighting in this battle was hand-to-hand combat, room to room, building to building, and this building was constantly being fought after. Months and months, these soldiers were fighting over very small confined spaces, and the Barricadi gun factory is one of those key places that both sides was fighting over a lot. Now if we move over to the next poster here, this will be a little bit about the snipers of the Battle of Stalingrad. So the main sniper that was most well known throughout the battle was Vasily Zaitsev. So he was basically the poster boy for the Soviet forces. He was used as like a propaganda piece, but he racked up 242 confirmed kills on Nazi soldiers. And then we do also have a little bit of information as well about the female snipers, who also did play a really big role in the battle. There's not really a whole lot of information about them, but we do know that there was 2,000 female snipers that were trained as snipers in the Soviet Union, and they did partake in the Battle of Stalingrad. And these guys, most of them did not survive to the end of the war, but they did have a very devastating effect, and they had a very demoralizing effect on the enemies that they were firing upon.
So hi, my name is Brian. I will be going over the German doctor Hans Diebold. He starts off his narrative by explaining how he became a POW. He first started with the German 6th Army and went over to the Red Army, and was a POW as a doctor. They used him. He didn't mind at all because he felt like he was doing his part. And he talks about experiences working under one light and sharing the room, sharing the one light, trying to save as many people as possible. He really cared about humanity. And that leads us to pain. There was a great pain in Stalingrad. Stalingrad faced over 400 deaths of Russians and over 200,000 German soldiers dying. This image explains the pain. My legs are gone. They amputated them. They did the surgery right there in the forest. The conditions were most primitive. They put me on a table to operate, and there was no iodine. They sawed my legs off with a simple saw, both legs. They drove for 4 miles to get iodine from another village while I lay on the table. Without anesthesia, instead of anesthesia, a bottle of moonshine. There was nothing but an ordinary saw, a carpenter saw. So this simple quote explains a lot of Stalingrad and what a lot of soldiers had to go through. Here is a picture much later, in 1963, of a veteran at a statue of Motherland Calls. It gives an explanation of what a lot of soldiers went through and what cost the cost of them winning the war. Next, we'll be going to Vasily Grossman. He Grossman documented war crimes committed by the Romanians during the occupation of the area of Stalingrad. So he was a reporter, and he reported back to the Russian army about everything that was happening. He was seen as a real soldier, but he honestly was just there to report and report everything that was happening, and to the conditions and what they went through, what the soldiers had to do to eat, and etc. Next is exhaustion. Exhaustion was very important during the war. There was no such thing as a day off. It was 24 hours a day, bombs going off, shootings, blasts. They didn't have a schedule, to rest. It was just months of trying to survive. And a lot of soldiers faced exhaustion, and a lot of them, during the German sickness, a lot of soldiers from the German side, they just fell dead. And that was, in conclusion, due to exhaustion, stress, and weather conditions. And exhaustion played a big part in a lot of the casualties falling during Stalingrad. The next one is doubt. Doubt was another psychological mindset many soldiers had to face, because as the months went by and as friends and fellow soldiers kept collapsing and going on the ground, they had a lot of doubt. A lot of soldiers wanted to desert, but they knew that if they tried deserting and were caught, they would be executed. A lot of soldiers try to make self-inflicted wounds just so they can leave the war, and this plays a big pull on the psychological mindset, because they were very exhausted, they were very hungry. A lot of soldiers weren't being fed, and they didn't know how long the war would last, and this caused for a lot of desertion and a lot of casualties as well for the psychological mindset. And lastly, we have the Mamayev Kurgan. Mamayev Kurgan is on a hill near the center of Stalingrad, overlooking the city and the Volga River. The Russians called it the Hill 102. And it was very important because this was a great agricultural landscape that was pivotal in owning Stalingrad, because it gives you a whole view of the city. Today they make a statue in remembrance, the Motherland Calls, and it was to show the importance of the Mamayev Kurgan.
So here we have some examples of what your typical soldier might be eating. Your soldier would actually be having some type of hard candies or chocolates within their K or C rations. During the summer months, your typical soldier would be eating roughly around 1 loaf of bread per man. But as the winter months progressed, their rations kept on getting increased. Eventually, the rations got cut to the point where they're eating only 2.5 slices of bread per man. If you can imagine, bread was roughly around 50% of the calories that the soldiers would be eating. They would also be having canned meats, canned vegetables. They would also scrounge around, get some fresh vegetables, other canned goods, eggs if possible. But for only they were eating only 2.5 slices of bread per man from the months of December to January and February. So if you can imagine only eating roughly around 700 calories, you're also in freezing temperatures of -30 to -15 degrees, and you're in fighting conditions. Winters were very harsh, -15 to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. This is just an example of cold, sticking your hand in a freezing cold container of water. People, you can only last for about a minute or so, just to the point where it gets uncomfortable. But just imagine this sensation going all over your body with no hope or feeling of warmth in your future. Believe it or not, most people think that combat was the biggest killer of troops and soldiers. But actually the biggest killer was not combat. It was a combination of starvation, exposure to the extreme cold weather, and disease. So the top picture is an example of what your soldiers might be having during the summer months. All their rations are all laid out. They would have canned meats, cigarettes, and other canned goods. In the middle, you have an example of a soldier bringing rations to soldiers in the front line. If you're on the front line, bunkered down and are under heavy gunfire, you just can't get up and say, "Time out, I'm hungry, let's go to the field kitchen and get some grub." It wouldn't be like that. So soldiers would bring their rations in these giant portable canteens. And these soldiers were targeted because they would make a lot of noise clinking around with all their utensils. And the enemy soldier would know that you're carrying food. Mind you, both you and the enemy are starving at this point in the winter. And unfortunately, if the guy who is bringing your food gets killed, you and your unit are going to be suffering a couple more days of starvation, and you're that much closer to death. Which brings me down to the two pictures down here. The picture of the gentleman down here is more an example of what a soldier might be looking at during the fall or winter months. You can just kind of see his miserable expression on his face. He's clearly eating not a very nutritious and delicious soup ration he's eating there. During the winter months, the horses were slaughtered because they ran out of fodder and food for them. But unfortunately, you had around 200,000 soldiers to feed. Slaughtering only a couple hundred or 1,000 horses isn't gonna help your situation. It would only last you a couple days or so. So what they would do is expand the nutrition value as much as possible by using them in stews and soups, and even boiling the horse hooves as some type of trying to extract all the nutrition as much as possible from them. So these are a list or a collection of all the books and sources that we used for this project and exhibit. We have your books and memoirs of the snipers. We have a collection of memoirs from the various soldiers in Stalingrad. Blood Red Snow is an account of a single soldier in the conflict. And there is Survivors of Stalingrad. Survivors of Stalingrad is a collection of memoirs of various soldiers, German and Russian, in the conflict.
No. Oh, okay.
I mean, he has a mic there, so just go ahead. No, too much. No, go for it.
Okay. Hi, my name's Shelby Houghton. I'm a business student here at Cal State East Bay, emphasis in accounting, and I saw this and I just thought it was really neat. I've never seen something like this on campus. I think it gets students of all different majors to interact and talk to different people, but also see what different majors are doing. And I think that's really important on a commuter campus to be able to see that and interact and make you feel like a community. And I think it's really neat. I didn't really know anything about Stalingrad, and to actually interact with the artifacts that they have here and to hear about it was really cool. All right.